Welcome to Starbound. I'm Larissa, and I'll be narrating for you today. But before we get into today's story, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. It's completely free and allows us to pop up on your feed more often. Let's go. Kras traced a claw along the rim of his drink, the metallic screech drawing irritated glances from nearby patrons of the Void's Edge Cantina. The massive reptilian paid them no mind, his cold yellow eyes fixed on the starfield visible through the grimy viewport.
You ever wonder why they really blocked it off?
He asked, not looking at his drinking companion. Across the table, Shen clicked her mandibles in annoyance. The arachnoid smuggler had heard this particular line of questioning too many times.
Here we go again,
she chittered.
Every time you drink too much fermented grack, you start with the ghost stories.
I'm serious, Kras rumbled, finally turning to face her. The cantina's dim lighting caught on his weathered scales, highlighting old scars that spoke of countless battles.
The Galactic Council doesn't just cordon off massive sections of space for no reason, especially not with those kinds of warnings.
Dangerous threat lurks within. She mimicked the formal tones of council proclamations. Tread at your own peril. Her chelicerae twitched in what passed for laughter among her kind. It's bureaucratic nonsense designed to keep the masses in line. Nothing more. The cantina around them buzzed with the usual evening crowd, a mix of species from across known space, most sporting the telltale signs of lives lived outside the law. Weapons poorly concealed beneath cloaks, cybernetic augments that would be illegal in council space, the distinctive swagger of those who answered to no authority but their own. The stolen Federation cruiser they'd converted into their primary hideout had come a long way from its original military purpose. The cantina itself was a testament to their success. What had once been the cruiser's sterile mess hall now pulsed with patchwork personality. Mismatched tables and chairs salvaged from a dozen different raids filled the space, while strings of captured nebula lights cast ever-shifting colors across the bulkheads. Behind the bar, a repurposed medical dispenser now served drinks through a tangled network of tubes and taps, each one labeled in a different language. The renovation had been Shen's idea. Something about making their hideout feel more like a proper pirate haven, and less like a stolen military vessel. Kras had to admit she'd been right. Even the viewport, scratched and stained as it was, added character. Though he suspected the grime had less to do with aesthetic choice and more to do with nobody wanting to clean it while wearing a vacuum suit.
Still,
Kras persisted.
You've heard the stories. Ships that venture too deep into the forbidden zone never return. Strange signals that don't match any known patterns. Some say
a lot of things,
interrupted a gruff voice from the bar. The speaker, a burly Chronaxian with metallic plates instead of skin, raised his glass in mock salute.
But what matters is that we're here. We're safe, and the Council's fancy laws can't touch us.
A chorus of laughter rippled through the cantina. Pirates, smugglers, and outlaws of all stripes sharing in the irony of discussing legality. Kras found himself chuckling despite his earlier intensity. The big reptilian had to admit there was something deliciously satisfying about using the Council's forbidden zone as their personal sanctuary.
To the Council.
Shen raised her glass, multiple eyes glittering with mischief.
May their warnings continue to keep honest citizens away from our little piece of paradise.
The resulting cheer was loud enough to rattle the viewport, dozens of species united in their disdain for authority. Music drifted from a corner where a trio of melodians performed on instruments that might have been valuable antiques or worthless knockoffs. No one really cared which, as long as they kept playing. The sound mingled with a dozen different languages and dialects, creating the unique ambience that only existed in these places, where legality is mere suggestion. A fresh round of drinks appeared at their table, courtesy of a server drone they'd reprogrammed to accept anything vaguely currency-shaped as payment. The machine's original Federation military protocols now manifested only and its oddly formal serving posture and tendency to salute after delivering drinks. As Kraz joined in the toast, he couldn't quite shake the feeling that someday they might learn exactly why this region of space was forbidden. But for now, the drink was good, the company was questionable, and the profits were better than ever. The cantina's atmosphere shifted before anyone saw him enter. Conversations quieted, postures straightened, and more than a few patrons suddenly remembered urgent business elsewhere. Pirate Lord Zekska had that effect on people, though not through any obvious intimidation. The massive reptilian simply possessed the kind of presence that demanded attention and fear.
Fascinating discussion.
Zeska's voice carried across the cantina as he approached Kraz and Shen's table. Unlike most of his species, his scales bore an iridescent sheen that caught the nebula lights in hypnotic patterns.
Please don't let me interrupt your speculation about cancel warnings.
Kraz started to stand, but Zekska waved him back down with a casual flick of his clawed hand. The pirate lord pulled up a chair, its metal frame groaning under his weight. The serving drone immediately appeared with his usual drink, a smoking concoction that might have been toxic to most species.
You know what I think about the council?
Zekska took a long drink, vapor curling from his nostrils.
I think they're bureaucrats who couldn't find their own tails with both hands and a map. All these rules, all these warnings, just ways to keep control through fear.
Shen's Shelashire clicked in agreement, though Kraz noted she'd drawn her limbs closer to her body, a subtle sign of deference.
Look around you!
Zekska gestured expansively, his drink casting weird shadows through its vapor.
We've been operating from this forbidden zone for what? 3 cycles now? Making raids across half the galaxy, building our fleet ship by stolen ship. And what has the council done? Nothing. Because they can't touch us here.
He wasn't wrong. What had started as a desperate gamble, hiding in the forbidden zone after a particularly messy heist, had grown into something unprecedented. Their original stolen cruiser now served as just one hub in a sprawling network of hideouts and bases. Ships taken from a dozen different civilizations now flew under their banner, striking wherever opportunity presented itself.
Better yet,
Zekska continued, his yellow eyes gleaming with predatory satisfaction.
their own warnings work in our favor. The legitimate traffic routes go way around this sector, which means no patrols, no witnesses, and no competition. We've got ourselves an empire in the making, my friends.
The pirate lord's enthusiasm was infectious. Around the cantina, others had drawn closer to listen, drawn by his vision of a future where they weren't just raiders, but rulers. Even Kraz felt his earlier unease about the Forbidden Zone fading in the face of such confidence.
Only one problem.
Zekska's tone shifted slightly, introducing a note of frustration to his earlier bravado.
Can't build an empire without workers. Raiding's good money, but it takes bodies to maintain bases, repair ships, process cargo, and trying to grab slaves from council space is more trouble than it's worth. They might ignore piracy, but they get real interested when their citizens start disappearing.
The pirate lord drained his drink, vapor wreathed his head like a crown.
We need a workforce that won't be missed. Something off the council's radar entirely. But where do we find that many people in a sector that's supposed to be empty?
The question lingered in the smoky air, met only by thoughtful silence and the soft music of the Melodian trio. It was the eternal problem of their profession. Plenty of ways to take things, but never enough hands to manage what they'd taken. The serving drone wobbled past their table with another round, its salute now distinctly crooked after too many impacts with low-hanging pipes. Zekska caught the drink without looking, his attention focused on a holographic display he'd activated on the table's scratched surface.
Look at this.
He gestured at the rotating image of their latest acquisition, a luxury passenger liner they'd stripped down and converted into a mobile repair dock.
Beautiful ship, top-of-the-line automated systems. But do you know what automation can't do? Load cargo. Make repairs that require actual thinking. Keep the more delicate goods from getting damaged.
Kraz leaned forward, studying the hologram.
We tried droids for that last supply run from the Meridian sector. Half of them broke down before we finished unloading.
And the other half tried to report us to station security, Shen added, mandibles twitching with remembered annoyance. Apparently their ethics protocols were better shielded than we thought. A burst of raucous laughter from the bar drew their attention. A group of newer recruits were entertaining themselves by tossing small objects through a Chronaxian's decorative chessports. The pirate lord watched them with an expression that mixed amusement and calculation.
Eager bunch,
he mused, vapor still curling from his earlier drink.
But too few. We could recruit every desperate outlaw and failed mercenary in council space and still not have enough hands. Not for what I have planned.
Something in his tone made the others lean closer. Zexka's plans had taken them from a ragtag band of survivors to the most successful pirate fleet in known space. When he got that particular gleam in his eye, fortunes tended to change.
The council,
he continued, deactivating the hologram with a sweep of his clawed hand,
likes to pretend they control everything. That their laws and their warnings shape the galaxy. But there's so much space out there. So many worlds they don't even know exist. Worlds full of people who have never heard of the council or their rules.
Primitives? Shen's Shelosire clicked rapidly, her species equivalent of raised eyebrows. Risky. Most aren't developed enough to be useful.
Depends on the primitives.
Zeska's scales caught the light as he shifted, creating that hypnotic pattern that often preceded his grandest schemes.
Get the right ones, with just enough technology to understand basic tasks, but not enough to resist properly.
He let the thought hang in the smoky air. Kraz was about to point out the challenges of finding such a conveniently suitable primitive species when rapid footsteps approached their table. A younger reptilian, scales still bright with youth, practically skidded to a stop beside them. The pirate lord's expression suggested he'd been expecting this interruption.
My lord,
the young pirate's words stumbled out between heavy breaths.
That deep-range scan you ordered? We found something. A planet, just at the edge of our usual territory. And there's a signal coming from it. Transmissions we can't quite decode, but they're definitely artificial.
Zeska's smile showed an impressive array of teeth.
Tell me more.
The command center of their stolen Federation cruiser still bore scars from its original capture, plasma burns on the walls, impact craters in the deck plating, and one particularly impressive gash through the tactical display that nobody had bothered to replace. The pirates had simply worked around the damage, adding their own improvements with all the subtlety of a meteor strike. Stolen holographic projectors cluttered every surface, each showing different aspects of their target.
Atmosphere composition matches most carbon-based life.
The young scout who'd introduced himself as Vex manipulated one of the displays with quick, nervous movements.
Gravity's high, though. Might be why we missed it on earlier sweeps. The dense core throws off standard scanning patterns.
Zexka stood at the center of the chaos, his iridescent scales reflecting the various holographic readings and mesmerizing patterns.
Show me the transmission intercepts.
The air filled with sound, a cacophony of signals in various frequencies. Most was gibberish, but occasional patterns emerged that were clearly artificial in origin. Shen, who'd followed them from the cantina out of professional curiosity, extended one limb toward a particular audio stream.
That's got structure to it.
Her Shelosire clicked thoughtfully. Definitely communication. Not just random emissions, but the encoding method isn't like anything in our database.
Primitive doesn't mean simple.
Kraz rumbled from his position near the main viewport. The big reptilian had been studying the tactical displays with growing unease.
Those signals are being broadcast with purpose. They know what they're doing, even if we don't understand it.
Perfect.
Zekska's smile hadn't diminished since they left the cantina. If anything, it had grown wider with each new piece of information.
Advanced enough to be useful, primitive enough to be manageable. And look at the population density readings. Billions of potential workers just waiting to be properly motivated.
The command center's crew, a mix of species chosen more for competence than loyalty, worked efficiently around them. Navigation plots were calculated, weapon systems checked, and shield generators hummed to life. Their fleet had grown impressive over the years. 12 capital ships supported by dozens of smaller craft, each one stolen and modified to suit their needs.
We'll take the whole fleet,
Zekska announced, causing several crew members to look up in surprise.
No sense being subtle about it. Show of force right from the start. Let them know resistance isn't an option.
The whole fleet.
Kraz shifted uncomfortably.
My lord, that leaves our other bases vulnerable, and for primitives, a single ship would be more than enough to...
Think bigger!
Zekska interrupted, moving to the main tactical display. His claws traced the planned approach vector with practiced ease.
This isn't just another raid. This is the foundation of our empire. We go in strong, we go in prepared, and we take everything.
The pirate lord's enthusiasm was infectious. Around the command center, crew members straightened with pride. They weren't just pirates anymore. They were conquerors, about to claim their first subject world. Even Kraz felt his doubts being swept away by the grandeur of it all.
What about defenses?
Shen asked, practical as always.
Even primitives usually have some kind of military.
Zekska gestured at the fleet's weapon system readout.
Energy shields that can shrug off asteroid impacts, plasma projectors that can cut through battleship armor. Meanwhile, they're probably still trying to figure out basic spaceflight. What could they possibly have that would threaten us?
The scout Vex pulled up another display.
We detect some orbital installations, but they're crude. Probably early warning systems or primitive communication relays, nothing military grade. Plot a course,
Zekska ordered, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority.
Sound general quarters. I want every ship ready for action within the hour. It's time to show these primitives their new place in the galaxy.
As the command center erupted into activity, Kraz found himself drawn to the main viewport. In the distance, barely visible against the starfield, a small white pinprick brighter than the others, the star of the system they were about to jump to. Strange, he thought, how something so peaceful-looking could represent such a dramatic change in their fortunes. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, a testament to how far they'd come from their early days of uncoordinated raids. 12 capital ships and their support craft, weapons primed and shields humming with stolen power. The bridge of Zekska's flagship bustled with anticipation as they prepared for their first look at their future conquest.
Visual range in 30 seconds,
Vex announced from his station, still managing to sound nervous despite their overwhelming show of force.
A long-range scans still show consistent with initial readings, though there's some interference.
Zeska stood at the center of his command desk, scales gleaming under the tactical displays.
Put on the main viewer as soon as we have visual. I want everyone to see the beginning of our new
The words died in his throat as the image materialized.
That's not possible.
Shen's chelicere clicked rapidly in agitation.
The scans showed vegetation, oceans, atmospheric patterns.
Where they'd expected to find a pristine, primitive world, a massive gray sphere dominated the viewport. The planet's entire surface was covered in structures, countless layers of architecture stretching from pole to pole. Artificial lights flickered across its surface in complex patterns, forming what looked like transportation networks that spanned continents. What they'd interpreted as natural features were actually massive industrial complexes and urban centers that dwarfed anything in Council space.
The scans,
Kraz rumbled from his tactical station.
They weren't wrong. They were being fed false data.
His clawed hands moved across his console.
We're getting new readings now that we're closer. The power signatures alone.
My lord! Vex's voice cracked. We're being hailed! Vex's scale shifted colors slightly, a sign of stress that few in the crew had ever seen their leader display. But his voice remained steady as he gave the order.
On screen.
The being that appeared on their display was eerily similar to a council species, but with subtle differences that somehow made it more unsettling. Pink-skinned, with fur only on its head, wearing what was clearly a military uniform of some kind. Its expression was more resigned than concerned.
Attention unidentified vessels.
The alien spoke in perfect galactic standard.
You are currently trespassing in human-controlled space. This constitutes a violation of our agreement with the Galactic Council. Please state your purpose and prepare for inspection.
The command deck fell silent. This was not at all how first contact with primitives was supposed to go. Zeska's claws dug into the armrest of his command chair as he processed this dramatic shift in circumstances. But the pirate lord hadn't come this far by backing down from challenges. His voice dripped with contempt as he responded.
We don't recognize the Council's authority, and we certainly don't recognize yours. This sector is about to become part of our new empire, starting with your world.
The human's expression shifted from resignation to something closer to tired annoyance. The alien commander muttered something under its breath that didn't translate, though it sounded distinctly uncomplimentary. The human commander sighed and shook his head.
Look, I get it. You're pirates. You saw a restricted zone and thought, hey, perfect hiding spot. Fine. But you really should have done your homework before deciding to play Empire.
Zeska's scales rippled with barely contained rage. Being lectured by what he thought was a primitive was bad enough. Being dismissed as a mere nuisance was intolerable. His claws tightened on his chair's armrest until the metal groaned.
Commence standard attack pattern,
he snarled, cutting the transmission with a savage gesture.
Show these humans what real space combat looks like!
The pirate fleet moved with practiced coordination, spreading out into an attack formation they'd perfected through countless successful raids. Their stolen Federation cruisers formed the core, while lighter vessels moved to flanking positions. Weapon systems powered up, shields strengthened, and targeting computers locked onto what they assumed were vital infrastructure points across the planet's artificial surface.
Multiple contacts,
Kraz reported from Tactical, his voice tight with growing concern.
Launching from everywhere. Surface installations we didn't detect, orbital platforms that weren't there a moment ago, and...
He paused, checking his readings.
At least 3 other planetary bodies in the system are showing military activity.
Shen's chelicerae clicked rapidly as she processed sensor data.
Their technology isn't matching anything in our database. No energy signatures we recognize, no standard configurations. It's like they developed completely independently of the Council. It doesn't matter,
Zeska declared, though his scales had shifted to a darker hue that betrayed his unease.
We have superior numbers, superior firepower. Launch fighters target their orbital facilities first. Cut off their ability to coordinate.
The void between planets filled with movement as both sides deployed their forces. The pirates' stolen fighter craft, a mix of various council designs modified for better performance, streaked toward their targets. But the human vessels, they moved wrong. Their acceleration curves defied standard physics models. Their formations followed patterns that made no tactical sense, yet somehow worked perfectly.
My lord!
Vex's voice shook as he studied his sensor readings.
I'm detecting power signatures from their orbital platforms that exceed anything in our records. They're not just defense stations, they're...
The rest of his warning was lost as the first human weapons fired. Zexka had seen a lot of combat over his years as a pirate. He'd witnessed the best weapons Council Space had to offer, and stolen many of them himself, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for this level of firepower. The human defenses didn't just engage their fleet, they rewrote the local laws of physics to do so. Space itself seemed to twist and bend around their weapons' effects.
Shields failing on multiple ships,
Kraz reported, his usual stoic demeanor cracking.
Their attacks are... I don't even know how to describe what they're doing to our defenses. It's like they're hitting us from directions that don't exist.
Through the viewport, Zexka watched one of his light cruisers literally fold in on itself, crushed by forces his sensors couldn't even classify. The humans were casually demonstrating technological superiority on a scale that made the Council's most advanced weapons look like children's toys. The Pirate Lord felt something he hadn't experienced since his earliest days as a common thief. Genuine fear. On the tactical displays, more human vessels appeared every second, emerging from what had seemed to be ordinary sections of their worldwide city. Their entire planet was a weapons platform, and they'd just walked right into its firing range.
All ships!
He tried to keep the tremor out of his voice.
Fall back to...
The human commander's face reappeared on their screen, expression unchanged.
You were warned.
The bridge of Zexka's flagship descended into controlled chaos as damage reports flooded in from across the fleet. Emergency lighting cast everything in a bloody red glow, accentuated by the flash of distant weapons fire through the viewport. The Pirate Lord's iridescent scales had dulled to a flat, anxious gray as he watched his empire-building dreams literally fold in on themselves.
Cruiser 7 is gone,
Kraz reported, his tactical station sparking from multiple overloads.
8 and 3 are... I don't even know how to describe what's happening to them. Their matter density is increasing exponentially, but their volume isn't changing. That shouldn't be possible.
Shen's Shalashire hadn't stopped clicking since the battle began. Their weapons are operating on principles we've never seen. They've weaponized fundamental forces, gravity, strong nuclear force, spatial geometry itself. Through the viewport, Zexka watched another of his ships discover exactly what spatial geometry weapons meant. The vessel seemed to stretch, its hull elongating like pulled taffy before snapping back to normal size, minus a perfectly cylindrical section of its midsection. The two halves drifted apart, their edges impossibly smooth, as if that section of space had simply ceased to exist.
Multiple new contacts,
Vex called out, his voice cracking.
Ships launching from the planet's surface! More emerging from the other planets and system. We're being surrounded!
The human vessels moved with devastating precision, their formations following patterns that seemed random, until the moment they revealed their deadly purpose. Fighters that could turn at angles that should have pulped their pilots, capital ships that appeared to be in multiple locations simultaneously, weapon effects that simply ignored the laws of physics as the pirates understood them.
Fall back!
Zexka ordered. His earlier bravado completely evaporated.
Emergency jump protocols! Get us out of here!
But retreat proved as impossible as resistance. The humans had somehow altered the local space-time geometry, creating a bubble of normal space surrounded by something else. Their hyperspace generators couldn't get a lock on any valid jump vectors.
They're hurting us,
Kraz realized watching the tactical display.
Each shot is deliberately forcing us into a specific formation.
The Pirate Lord's claws dug furrows in his command chair's armrest. Years of successful raiding, of outsmarting council authorities, of building his criminal empire. All of it meant nothing in the face of this casual display. His remaining ships were being systematically taken apart by weapons that shouldn't exist, made by a civilization that nobody even knew about. Except, apparently, the council. A new alarm shrieked through the command deck. On the main viewer, massive structures were deploying from the planet's surface, orbital defense platforms that dwarfed anything in council space. They hadn't been hidden or cloaked. They simply hadn't existed until the humans decided they were needed. The level of technological advancement required to fabricate and deploy such weapons in real time made Zexka's head spin.
My lord.
Shen's voice carried a note of hysteria he'd never heard from her before.
I don't think the council's restricted this sector to keep people away from the humans. I think they restricted it to keep the humans contained, to keep them from noticing the rest of us.
The human commander's face appeared on the screen again, and this time, his expression held something almost like pity.
I really hate having to clean up after others' messes. The paperwork is absolutely murderous.
Zexka had never seen a battle end like this. Usually there was a struggle, desperation, last-ditch efforts to turn the tide, but his fleet wasn't being defeated. It was being systematically dismantled with a kind of methodical precision that spoke of vast technological superiority and endless patience.
Cruisers 2 and 5 are gone,
Kraz reported, his usual stoic demeanor completely shattered.
Ford's drive core is experiencing some kind of cascade effect I've never seen before. Their engineer says the laws of thermodynamics have stopped applying to their engine room.
The tactical display told a story that Zexka's pride didn't want to accept. Kraz's earlier report was correct. Their remaining ships were being herded into an ever-tightening formation. Each human weapon impact deliberately placed to remove any possibility of escape. This could hardly be called a battle.
Look at their fleet movements.
Shen's Shelasire clicked rapidly as she analyzed the sensor data.
They're not even using standard combat formations. Every ship is operating independently, but somehow maintaining perfect condition. They don't even need to be coordinated.
Through the viewport, Zexka watched another orbital defense platform materialize from the cityscape below. The scale of engineering required to build such massive structures in real time defied comprehension. His own fleet's most advanced technology, stolen from the Council's finest shipyards, seemed primitive in comparison.
Even more ships launching from the other planets,
Vex announced, his voice barely a whisper.
The fourth one is deploying what looks like... I don't even know how to classify these readings. The energy output is beyond our sensor's capacity to measure. It's like they just spat out a star.
The human vessels moved through space like they owned it, casually violating what the pirates had thought were immutable laws of physics. A squadron of fighters passed through their formation, somehow occupying the same space as Zexka's ships without collision. The effect lasted only moments, but it left their shields completely inverted, now keeping their own atmosphere in, rather than protecting from external threats.
My lord.
Kraz's voice carried the weight of terrible realization.
I don't think they're actually trying to destroy us. With technology like this, they could have obliterated us before we even arrived in the system. They're just toying with us.
The pirate lord's scales had lost all color, fading to a dull gray that reflected his shattered confidence. Every strategy, every tactic he learned through years of successful raiding meant nothing against an enemy that could simply ignore the rules of reality whenever convenient. A new alert caught their attention, more ships appearing, but these weren't emerging from the planets. They simply materialized in space, as if they'd always been there and had just decided to become visible.
All ships!
Zexka's voice cracked as he gave the order he'd never thought he'd give.
Stand down! Power down weapons! Deactivate shields!
He paused, swallowing his pride.
Surrender!
The human commander's face appeared on their screen once more, still wearing that expression of mild annoyance. Another figure had joined him, someone in what was clearly a civilian business suit rather than a military uniform.
Finally.
The civilian sighed, holding up what looked like a stack of physical documents.
Now we can begin processing the paperwork for your official surrender, followed by forms TR-7249 through TR-7255 regarding illegal border crossing, and then we'll need to schedule a hearing about unauthorized commercial activities in a restricted sector.
Zexka realized with growing horror that the humans weren't going to simply kill them or imprison them. They were going to bureaucrat them to death, something the Council wishes they could do. The command deck of Zexa's flagship had fallen eerily quiet, broken only by the soft hum of dying systems and the occasional spark from overloaded consoles. The pirate lord sat motionless in his command chair, watching through the viewport as human ships methodically surrounded each of his surviving vessels, his mighty fleet, pride of the Forbidden Zone, reduced to floating wreckage by technology that casually ignored physics.
Transfer of prisoners will begin shortly.
The human civilian continued, shuffling through his papers with bureaucratic enthusiasm.
Please ensure all crew members have their identification ready for processing. If you have any non-standard medical requirements, Form MED-338 must be completed in triplicate.
Kraz studied the tactical display, which now showed a complete analysis of the human fleet's capabilities, or at least what their sensors could understand of them.
Look at these power readings. Their smallest fighter carries more energy than our heaviest cruiser. And these weapons, some of them don't even register as weapons until after they've fired.
The Council knew.
Zexka spoke softly, his scales still that defeated gray.
All those warnings, all those restrictions. They weren't trying to keep anyone out. They were trying to keep us from provoking.
A new series of ships emerged from the cityscape below. These ones clearly designed for civilian transport rather than combat. They moved with the same physics-defying grace as their military counterparts, approaching the disabled pirate vessels with precise intent.
Boarding teams will be arriving momentarily,
the human commander announced, having returned to the screen.
Please inform your crew that resistance is unnecessary and will only result in additional paperwork.
He paused, checking something off screen.
Also, your ship's artificial gravity will be temporarily adjusted to Earth standard during processing. We find it helps prevent escape attempts.
As if on cue, Zexka felt a crushing weight settle over him, the human's casual motion of manipulating fundamental forces like gravity, as if it were a simple convenience, drove home just how badly they had misunderstood the situation. These weren't primitives they could raid and dominate. These were beings who treated the rules of the universe as polite suggestions. Through the increased gravity, Shen managed to raise one limb toward a new sensor reading. Energy spikes from the fourth planet. They're moving the planet, just slightly. Just enough to better position their orbital defense grid. They're moving a planet like we'd adjust a piece of furniture. The human boarding vessels were almost upon them now, their designs unlike anything in Council space. No visible engines, no standard hull configurations. They simply were, their existence seemingly independent of normal engineering constraints. Zexka watched them approach, finally understanding the true meaning of the Council's warnings.
We thought we were so clever,
he mumbled, his voice strained by the increased gravity.
Finding this perfect hiding spot, planning our little empire. We were children playing in the sand of a shark-infested beach, and we just dipped our toes in the water.
Sir, Vex called out weakly from his station. I'm detecting more ships, hundreds of them, all across the system. They're not even trying to hide them anymore. I think these humans could have ended this fight in seconds if they wanted to. They were just being polite about it. The first boarding shuttle made contact with their hull, the docking process accompanied by a sound that somehow translated directly into bureaucratic disapproval. Zexka's last thought, before the human troops entered his bridge, was a quiet appreciation for the Council's restraint in describing this region merely as forbidden. Some warnings, he realized, simply defied adequate description. Commander Jacob Mullard massaged his temples as he reviewed the preliminary incident report. The holoscreen floating above his desk displayed an ever-growing list of forms, procedures, and diplomatic notifications required for processing their unexpected visitors. Dealing with pirates was annoying enough. Dealing with pirates who'd managed to stumble into restricted space meant exponentially more paperwork. "Sir." His AI assistant materialized beside the desk, its avatar carefully designed to look professional without triggering uncanny valley responses in organic beings. "The Galactic Council has acknowledged receipt of our incident notification. They're requesting a full report on how their border control protocols failed."
Of course they are.
Jacob sighed, leaning back in his chair. Through his office viewport, he could see the captured pirate vessels being carefully towed toward the processing facilities. Their primitive shields had practically melted when exposed to standard Earth gravity.
Tell them we'll submit proper documentation once we've finished cataloging everything these idiots managed to steal from Council space.
The AI's expression shifted slightly, a subtle indication that it was accessing multiple data streams simultaneously. "The civilian administrative team has already identified stolen technology from at least 8 different council member species. The pirates appear to have been quite industrious."
And quite stupid,
Jacob muttered, pulling up footage from the brief engagement.
Did they really think we would have noticed a bunch of raids happening right on our border? We've been tracking them for months, waiting to see if the Council would handle it themselves.
His desk chirped as another report demanded attention. The processing teams had begun interviewing the captured pirates, and their responses ranged from terrified cooperation to complete psychological shutdown. The revelation that they'd attempted to raid a civilization capable of casual stellar engineering had apparently broken something in their understanding of the universe. "The Council's containment protocols are becoming increasingly ineffective," the AI noted, displaying statistics from similar incidents over the past few years. "This is the 3rd breach this quarter alone. Perhaps it's time to consider a more direct approach to border security." Jacob stood, walking to his viewport to watch the ongoing cleanup operation. Earth spread out below him, its cityscape stretching from horizon to horizon. In the distance, he could see one of the larger orbital platforms reinstalling the holographic camouflage that usually hid their more advanced infrastructure from long-range scans. The pirates had only seen a fraction of humanity's true capabilities, and that alone had been enough to shatter their worldview.
"The Council means well,"
he said finally,
"but their methods are outdated. They still think that legal restrictions are enough to maintain order."
He gestured at the captured fleet.
"Clearly, they're not."
The AI's avatar shifted to stand beside him at the viewport. "Shall I schedule a meeting with the Council representatives? The Diplomatic Corps has been suggesting a policy review for some time."
"Might as well,"
Jacob nodded.
"Better to address this now than wait for someone more dangerous than pirates to stumble into our space and have medicals send up something for this headache. Dealing with the Council bureaucracy always gives me a migraine."
As his AI began arranging the necessary meetings, Jacob returned to his desk and the mountain of paperwork still awaiting his attention. Sometimes he wondered if humanity's agreement to respect Council authority had been worth the administrative overhead it created. But then he remembered the alternative, the panic their capabilities would cause if fully revealed to unprepared species.
"At least pirates are straightforward,"
he mused, signing off on another processing form.
"They try to take something, we stop them, everyone goes home. Or to prison in their case."
He paused, considering.
"Though I suppose we should thank them for making the point about border security. Saves us having to convince the Council directly."
The AI's avatar flickered with what might have been amusement. "Shall I add that to the official report, sir?"
"Better not."
Jacob chuckled.
"Let's just process these ones and hope the Council finally takes our suggestion about upgrading their patrol protocol. I'd rather not spend the rest of my career filing incident reports about overambitious raiders."
Beyond his viewport, Earth's defenses continued their endless vigilance, most of their true nature hidden from those who weren't ready to understand them. The captured pirate fleet looked absurdly primitive among the city planet's towers, a stark reminder of the vast technological gap humanity had chosen to obscure for the sake of galactic stability. The commander turned back to his paperwork with a slight smile. Sometimes, the best way to protect your neighbors was to let them think they were protecting themselves from you.